Welcome to Mac Discussions. My name is Emma McCarty, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator at 93.3 CFMU. This time on Mac Discussions, we'll be discussing something that is really important right now, and that is the topic of mental health, particularly with university students. We're joined with Rachel Gibbs from the Student Wellness Center, as well as McMaster University student Sabrina Schindel. So to start, maybe we'll start with you, Sabrina, if you want to just say your program, your year, and then maybe why mental health is an important topic for you.
Sure. I'm Sabrina. I'm in my fourth year of geography and environmental science. Mental health and mental health advocacy and everything like this is really important to me because I, in the past, really struggled with my own mental health and with mental illness, and it kind of took over my life for a little while. And so when I figured a way to get back to on track, or in my mind, like where I was supposed to be, it was really important that I was helping other people and doing work and kind of everything for mental health that I could, because I think it's really important.
Awesome. And then if we just bounce over to you then, Rachel, kind of what is your role at the Student Wellness Center?
Yeah, so my role, I'm a counselor at the Wellness Center. So I see students on an individual basis, as well as I run a couple of groups at the Student Wellness Center. I'm sure I'll be talking more about that in some of the questions that we have, but yeah, that's my role.
Okay, awesome. So to start off then, I guess we can address the topic that is probably the biggest issue for a lot of students right now, which is online school, working remotely. What has that been like for you so far, and what's the impact been for you on your mental health, Sabrina?
It's been tough doing everything remotely, to say the least. It's been hard because one of the things like I've just struggled with in the past is kind of like self-management and like time management and things like that. So I used to structure like my life on the things I did on campus out of the house, because I was like part of some clubs and stuff. So it was kind of like I would have this, so I have time to do this and time to do this. So that's kind of been the hardest thing for me, is making the time and setting myself up to do the work at home, which is also, I'm not a home worker generally. I usually like go to the library and work not at home, because that's just kind of the way I separate my spaces in my head. So trying to find a way to make my home somewhere where I can actually work has been has been difficult, and just kind of keeping track of more things online, because it seems that there's stuff everywhere and each class has a different system that we use, and kind of just trying to find a way to keep on top of everything has been really difficult. And mental health wise, it's just been hard because it always feels like I'm playing a game of catch up that I'm kind of losing, and it's hard to like be feeling that way often. So that's been hard, but as the semester kind of went on, got a good bit better at it. But
yeah, it's definitely a position that no one expected to be in. Everyone was just kind of thrown into it. So obviously students are working from home, but also all of McMaster operations are pretty much at home. How did the Student Wellness Center adjust to that, and what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so when this initially happened in sort of, that March, April, we did have to sort of figure out and think pretty quick on our feet of like, okay, how are we going to manage this? And sort of do a pretty rapid shift to online and virtual services. So since sort of this happened, I guess back in April, we did do a pretty rapid shift. And now I would say we've gotten really, along with students, the hang of kind of this virtual world that we're navigating. So we have shifted all of our services to be online. So what that means is that from the point that you do an intake with a counselor, that would either be by phone or by video conference, like we're doing right now, and as well as individual counseling, as well as done by phone or video conference. We've also, and we're really excited that we've shifted all of our groups to be online as well. So that was a bit of a feat for us at the beginning. We're used to obviously seeing kind of students in the group environment. and had all of our kind of like materials and things like that planned for in-person services. So we had to make a pretty rapid shift to kind of offering those things online. But we're really excited that we've been able to do that. And we just, most of us have now run all of our virtual groups either for the first time, or a couple have done a few sessions of it now, and they've gone really, really well. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, that's great. I can imagine what kind of a feat it was at the beginning to transition it all over. So obviously the Student Wellness Center offers a variety of different things. What do they offer in regards to mental health for students?
Great question. So the Student Wellness Center is kind of divided into two halves, the sort of medical side where you go and see a physician, and then we have what we call sort of the counseling side. One of the best resources that I always direct students to right off the hop is our website, because I think it has some really great information there, and there's a lot of information there, and I think it sometimes tends to get a bit overlooked. For those of you who don't know, our website is www.wellness.mcmaster.ca, and you can find all kinds of information there about what we offer. But I do want to highlight a couple of things just off the hop here. So one of the things that I really like that's on our website, if you see across the top, there'll be all these different tabs, and one of them is what's called a resources tab. And here is basically a curated list of all kinds of different websites, apps, and things like that that we use, recommend, are kind of tried and true for us. It's kind of, we feel like it's a lot more helpful than just having a student do like a Google search on their own and try to sift through all that information, because there's just so much information out there. Mm-hmm. So we've kind of taken that step and done it for you and sort of curated a lot of information there. A lot of it is divided by kind of concerns that students come in with. So whether it's like anxiety or sleep, grief, a gamut of different issues that students will come in with, we've divided it up. And then at the top as well, there's all kinds of different websites there that we really like. So that's one tab that I particularly like to direct students towards. The other one is the programs tab that I really, I highly recommend. So this was kind of what I was referring to earlier when I was talking about some of those groups that we offer. There's a whole wealth of different groups that we offer at the Student Wellness Center. And I don't think students always necessarily know about that. Or if they do, sometimes they're really, really intimidated. And I get it, because it can be challenging, especially with, if you're struggling and going through mental health concerns, that some people feel really, uncomfortable about talking about it in a group. And one of the biggest myths that I always kind of clear up for students is that these groups are really a lot around skill building, learning different skills and tools, having weekly support from a therapist, which is really, really nice. And so I really like that option to get that weekly support that students are often requiring. So that's one of my favorite things as well. And then finally, under the contact section of the contact tab, you'll find information on how to reach us. If you're looking for more of that kind of individual support, or you feel like you're really struggling and maybe you've tried one of the groups and you're still feeling like, I'm still really struggling here with my mental health. We always encourage students to reach out. You can find all of our information on the contact tab, but the best way to reach us or set up an appointment is by phone. You will need to call by phone just to give all the ladies at reception your information, because they'll require things like your student number, your address, things like that. We can't see students without that kind of identifying information. So I always encourage students to call in. Again, the phone number 905-525-9140, and our extension is 27700. Again, all that information is on the website, so you don't have to memorize that by any means, but just so students are aware.
Yeah, awesome. So are those tabs something that was added in to accommodate the fact that students were working from home, or is that something you guys have always had?
That's something that we've always had. We constantly are updating our resources tab, though. So, for example, sometimes we'll have somebody come in and talk about a new service. So recently we had somebody from a website called Together All. It used to be called Big White Wall, but now it's called Together All. Come in and do sort of an in-service around some of the services they offer. So we add things constantly to that resource tab as we learn about things. Sometimes students even give us suggestions of things that they're using. Other colleagues or people in the mental health field also give us recommendations of different apps or new things to try. And we kind of always, sort of vet things out, see what, the app or the website is all about, and then see if it would be a useful tool for students. And if so, then we would add it to the resource tab.
Yeah. Have you added any mental health geared programs or activities lately that you've found students are really enjoying?
Mm-hmm. So some of the things under the programs tab, actually, we've added some things that are not necessarily group related in terms of skill building necessarily around anxiety or depression and things like that, but more with the idea of building connection. So I know that's been something that's been really challenging for students, especially students just coming into university. This is probably not what they expected their first year to look like, understandably so. So we've tried to add different ways that students can connect. So one of the things that we've added is something called pen pals, which is kind of like an old school way of meeting people, but in obviously a safe way. We recently started a book club as well. Again, a way for students to sort of like meet, and who knows, you might meet like a friend there that you can then sort of have as a buddy outside of those groups. Another thing that we added is what we call Zoom dine-ins, where people make meals and kind of eat together, again, to get that kind of sense of community that I think we're all really missing and really craving. So those are some new things that we've added since the pandemic has started.
Yeah, that's awesome. So kind of maybe moving away from the program side of it and more directly into mental health and dealing with mental health. Sabrina, did you want to touch on maybe ways that you are personally coping, or what different mechanisms you're doing to help your mental health while you're working from home?
Sure. I was lucky enough this year so I put in the lacrosse team, and so that was a huge kind of hit that we didn't have that part of our community, because usually we start off the year together. But I was lucky enough that I moved my best friend who I met on the lacrosse team, moved in with me at my student house in Hamilton this year. So I'm very lucky that we've had each other, because we use each other as a support a lot of the time, because we're both kind of having a hard time getting through everything we're dealing with this semester. And the reason I bring her up is because she actually bought a unicycle this semester for fun. Okay. And that has actually been quite a fun thing to kind of just get outside, because the two of us are already in the same household anyway, so we don't have to social distance or anything, and we've been learning how to unicycle. And that's been actually kind of a very good outlet. So I think kind of just activity might be one of them, but even just kind of learning a new skill that kind of takes all my focus, and just for whenever we're doing it, or whenever we're outside learning how to unicycle, we're kind of just focused on that. So it's been one thing that's just been allowing me to kind of take a break. But kind of on the same note, for me and my mental health, it's kind of allowing myself to have time where I'm not being productive, I guess, or productive in that working on school or committee stuff or something like that. Just letting myself kind of have breaks. The only problem that's been hard to do with the quarantine is that my breaks often involve watching a show on Netflix or something, and then kind of my whole day is on my computer, which is a bit hard for other reasons. But mental health wise, I guess it's just been kind of trying to find ways to get outside and stay active, and then also just allowing myself to not feel guilty if I take a break, or let myself just spend time with people my friends, well, not my friends, I'm not disobeying quarantine rules, but just spend time not actively doing work all the time, I guess, is big for me.
Yeah, that's super important. I think a lot of people are struggling with work-life balance, because it's all happening within one room. I know. Yeah. I can say that for myself as well. It's definitely just setting time and allotting time for different projects. From a counselor perspective, Rachel, what would you say are your tips for students struggling with mental health?
First of all, Sabrina, I want to say the unicycle, I love that. Such a great idea. And I think
it's so fun.
It really touches on one of the things I often recommend is activity, right? Like getting out and doing some of these activities, especially like, I hear a lot of students are saying, as it's getting colder, they don't want to go outside. And I'm like, I think we got to rethink this a little bit around like bundling up. And I understand if it's pouring rain, you might not want to go outside, but thinking about how we can do still safe activities, and especially still, doing safe activities with others, whether we're connecting like this way virtually, or connecting where we're outside and adhering to, social distancing rules. I always say I think they actually did a bit of a poor job in calling it social distancing. I think we probably should have called it physical distancing, because there's actually no reason why we still can't be social right now. And that's one of my biggest tips, is that I think students are really craving that connection. That's probably the number one thing that we've heard from a lot of students is, I feel isolated, I feel, alone, I feel kind of, very trapped and confined in this space. And to be honest, I think we're all feeling that way. And, one of the things I always recommend is we need to find out ways to stay connected. Again, whether it's in that virtual space. I personally go for a walk with a friend. We have a standing appointment each week and we go for a walk together. Of course, like adhering to social or physical distancing guidelines. But it's something that I think is still really important for us to be social, because that's one of the number one things that we're hearing from students. I think Sabrina touched on this a little bit as well, but the idea of what I call going back to the basics, and that's things around routine. We've really kind of, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I think all routine kind of went out the window. We were all like, baking banana bread in our pajamas, and like just kind of, there wasn't really a lot of routine. Like night was day, day was night, and things kind of got really blurred. Now I think that we've been at this for a few months. It's really important to think about how we can go back to establishing some of those routines that we had, prior to the pandemic. So I often tell students, like, set up your days very similar to like how you would be if you were going to class, right? So if you would normally have a class from 9 to 10 or something like that, watch that lecture during that time, or do schoolwork in some way during that time, and kind of set aside that time for schoolwork and having that structure. I know you're not physically leaving now and going to class, but really we want it to look relatively the same as how it did prior to the pandemic, just without you leaving your house and going to a physical space. So that's one thing, as well as sleep. I think sleep has been a really tough thing for students. I think those sleep habits have sort of shifted a lot, and we're kind of like moving things later in the day, sometimes staying up really late and then sleeping in, a lot into the next day. And I want to tell students, like, it's really, really important to kind of shift or work to shift those sleep cycles to being kind of back to normal. And I use normal quotes because normal might look different for everybody, but to kind of having, being awake during daylight hours and sleeping during kind of those nighttime hours, I think is really, really important for our mental health. We often don't think of sleep as being, necessarily that critical, but we know that it's important. And then, of course, like making sure that you're continuing to eat, exercise, all of those basics that we kind of sometimes just shrug off of like, oh yeah, no big deal. But we know that we often feel at our best or feel most well when we have those things intact.
Yeah, I think all of that, from what I've experienced, I'm sure everyone else's experience, is super important, especially routine. And like you said, you schedule a walk, which is not only routine, but is a way to get out of the house, is definitely important. So also
has that accountability piece as well. If you're really struggling with motivation, again, top things we've heard from students: I feel isolated, I feel unmotivated. If you're really struggling with that motivation, find an accountability buddy who's going to kind of keep you accountable, right? So I have a friend, like I said, who texts me and is like, okay, are we going on our walk? And even if sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't really feel like it, she's like, nope, we're going, right? Like, and vice versa, I do the same. So find that accountability buddy to keep you accountable for those things.
I think that's just important, I think, because it's like, I find even after I do something like that, even if before I was like, I don't know if I'm feeling this right now, like I'm not really in the headspace, I've never after been like, that was a waste of blank amount of time. Like, I regret going out to do that. Like, I regret spending half an hour, however long it was, like with that person, or just like outside. Like, that's never happened. So I think if you can have someone to push you to do it, like, that's really helpful.
Yeah. Another thing that you just reminded me of too was something that I was doing early into the pandemic was like FaceTime work type of thing, so that sure, I'm not sitting across from somebody, but we're still working. And one thing that I found interesting is there's actually like a whole YouTube community of people that record themselves studying or like doing work or something. And so I found that really helpful for me and probably other students, that you're like working with somebody. And I found it really motivating as something to do.
Sabrina, I know you were mentioning that you love that library environment. I was definitely a library dweller for sure. I think it was, I wanted to say it was my address at one point, almost like I just lived there during my undergrad. And I think students are really missing that. And that is a great idea, like either doing FaceTime. There's so many platforms now, Zoom, Google Hangouts, all those things where you can be working alongside other people and you're not really chatting, right? You're working. Then you can also remind each other to take breaks, and you can have, go grab a coffee or a tea and come back and have like a break and chat for a little bit and then go back to doing work. It kind of mimics that library environment without actually going or being at the library.
Yeah. So then I think my last question is for you, Rachel, would be obviously the Student Wellness Center, we talked about all the programs, how to schedule an appointment. What should a student do if they're in a mental health crisis and they can't immediately get in contact with the Student Wellness Center?
Great question. I think it's no secret that we see a large volume of students, especially now, just with everything going on with the pandemic. And of course, now exam time is upon us, and it's no question that it's a stressful time. So we do see, a large volume of students. And while we try to see everybody, as rapidly as we can, we always tell students, if you are in crisis, your best option in the Hamilton area is to call COAST, which is a crisis line. I will give the number out because I think it's important. I always tell people, throw it in your phone. Even if you think you might not use it, you never know when it might come in handy where you actually might need to use it for a friend, or if someone ever calls you in crisis, that you're not like panicking and kind of like rapidly trying to look it up, that you just have it in your phone. It's like, to me, it's like kind of having a 911. We just know that number off by heart, and I don't expect people to know the COAST number off by heart, but just throw it in your phone, have it in there. The number is 905-972-8338. And like, emergency services, it's a 24-hour, 7 days a week service that they offer, and they're great at COAST. So I always tell students, like, feel free to use that. If you're in distress, please don't hesitate. Of course, the other option is always to go to your emergency department or your closest emergency department. That may vary depending on where you're located, but get yourself familiar with those things. Again, it may not necessarily even be for yourself, but sometimes it may be for, somebody else in crisis. It's really helpful to, be aware of your emergency department or your local crisis line. COAST is Hamilton specific, but I'm aware that not all students are necessarily in Hamilton right now. So make yourself familiar with those resources is sort of my first line of defense, shall we say. The second thing that I really like is maybe not necessarily just for crisis, but if you're kind of feeling like you're struggling and you need more like on-demand counseling. We know that like counseling appointments, you might not have it that hour that you're really struggling, or that day even that you're really struggling. It may be a couple days later. So one thing that we recommend is a service that's called Good to Talk. And Good to Talk you can reach either via phone, or one thing that they offer, which we really love as well, is via text, which is really nice. And I think especially for the university community, we're all kind of on our phones quite often and texting quite often. So that's an option as well. Good to Talk, again, 24 hours, 7 days a week. To access the text option, you would type in Good to Talk, and it's like GOOD with the number 2, and then Talk ON, which is Ontario. And this is, again, for students who are in Ontario. and you would text that to 686868, and you'll get an immediate response from an individual who, again, will talk to you, help with strategies, things like that, which is really, really nice. The phone number for that is 1-866-925-5454. And again, 24 hours, 7 days a week. There's a live body on the other end of the phone. It's not like an automated message or anything like that. A live body on the other end of the phone to help you with kind of like in that moment, right? If you're really struggling, if you're really feeling stressed, any of those things, I encourage people to call those or text. The other thing that the Student Wellness Center offers is one of the programs that we offer is called Stress Less. And Stress Less right now is running on Mondays and Wednesdays from 3 to 4 o'clock. And it's kind of, I equate it often to like a psychologist holding office hours. That's kind of similarly to what it's like. It's on a drop-in basis. And so you're able to access that to talk to a psychologist about different strategies, tools, talk about stress. If you're having trouble and just want to talk about a problem, great for that. The psychologist name that runs that, his name is Nathan, and he's awesome. He's just a great guy to hang out with as well. So I always recommend that to students as well.
Okay, yeah, and we will for sure have not only the Student Wellness Center linked below this video, but all of the resources that you listed for students to access.
Awesome.
So thank you both so much for joining me to talk about all the mental health. I learned a lot. I'll try out some tips as well. And yeah, I hope all the students watching have also learned some different ways to cope with online school and just everything going on within their lives.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and best of luck to all the students out there. I know this is, sometimes a challenging time, but I think like I said, there's lots of resources out there to support you, and feel free to reach out to the Student Wellness Center anytime if you're in need of some support.
We would like to say a big thanks to both Rachel Gibbs and Sabrina Schindel for talking to us about the importance of mental health, as well as the resources offered by the Student Wellness Center. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, you can access any of the resources we talked about at the links below this video. If you would like to be part of our next MAC discussions or have questions you would like answered by a McMaster representative, you can contact us through any of our social media at 93.3 CFMU. For more MAC discussion videos, you can visit cfmu.ca/videos.